Today, let's talk about spatial computing. So this is a term that Apple came up with the launch of its new goggles, Apple Vision Pro, and the idea of spatial computing. Now, this is not a new field by any means. If you are familiar with Google Cardboard or the Oculus headset and the HTC Vive and all of these other companies that make these virtual reality environments. Spatial computing is basically Apple's spin on virtual reality. Now, here's the thing that I'm wondering about, and this is purely wondering because I've not had a chance to test these new devices. The local Apple store obviously does not have them yet, so there's no way to know. But the issue with spatial computing has not really necessarily been about image quality or immersion so much as latency. So latency is one of the biggest problems within virtual reality, within spatial computing. There's a couple of different kinds, right? There's motion latency, where if you're wearing this thing right on your head and you turn your head, does the image move in sync with your body? Right? If there's even the slightest delay, you notice, you can feel, oh, that's kind of weird, right? So that's certainly one aspect. But the other aspect is input latency. And input latency is when you are doing stuff. So Apple's device supposedly uses eye movement tracking and your hands. The Oculus can use that. It also has these controllers, right? So you use these controllers to control what you're doing. And even these have a little bit of lag. Not a ton, but it's enough to break the illusion. It's enough to sort of throw you out. Now, in the controllers are pretty fast. So that's why Oculus, for example, had great games like Beat Saber, because they were very, very fast, highly responsive. And so you could pretend to have lightsabers cutting up these little objects flying at you on screen. But when you got into using their vision-based, where it's using the onboard cameras, it was really terrible. Like, it was a substantial amount of latency to the point where it was almost unusable. So those issues of latency are really what will make or break a device like Apple Vision Pro or the next generation Oculus headset or whatever. You've got to get the latency right? And the good news is, at least for Apple, they have a good history of getting stuff like that correct in terms of user interface. If you've ever used Apple's Pencil on the iPad, you'll look at it first and go, that's $139 for a stylus. Like, that seems excessive. But when you try it, you're like, okay, this actually behaves like a real pencil on paper. And no other stylus feels the way it does on Apple hardware. It is seamless. When you're painting in like Adobe Fresco, you're like, okay, this is pretty realistic. The pressure sensors, let you draw. So I'm optimistic that Apple will get that right. But it really is going to be the motion in a space to be able to say, like, okay, I'm going to touch this thing, and you reach out and you grab it and you're touching and you move these things around in this virtual space. They've got to get that right. They've got to get that right, because that's what's going to separate and justify the enormous price tag, even once they come out with lower cost models, because I'm sure they will. It's called Apple Vision Pro for a reason. There will probably be an Apple Vision, and knowing Apple, there'll be an Apple Vision Air, an Apple Vision Pro Plus, Apple Vision Ultra, Apple Vision Max. You name it. Apple will come up with stuff like that. But it is the latency that will really define how this thing feels and whether or not it's a success, especially if you're going to use it in any kind of industrial application or enterprise application where you want somebody to wear one of these things for 4, 5, 6 hours a day. There are virtual workspaces available, in the Oculus. They suck. They are terrible. The resolution is not great, but the latency of moving around, moving screens around and stuff in here is it's just unusable. So this is why this is just now part of my backdrop and not something that I use on a regular basis. So those are some initial thoughts about this spatial computing thing. Some things for you to think about as you evaluate these tools. Yes, there are plenty of use cases. We saw demos during Apple's announcements. We saw all sorts of conversation. But when it comes time to try these out, measure the latency, measure how it feels to move around in that environment. And if it feels good, it might be worth the price tag. If it feels even the slightest bit janky, it's probably not worth the price tag, and it's going to give you a headache. So that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button.